Hello, this is Gina from Her Cosmic Crown. Welcome back to my channel. And today we are going to discuss the planets. I want to discuss them today before we go into certain topics like what does the sun look like when it's in Aries versus when it's in Libra. A lot of people think just because two benefic planets are conjunct each other or aspecting each other in a strong way that that's going to produce a favorable outcome. But that's not necessarily true because each planet has its function, and other planets that are aspecting another planet may have two different agendas, and that creates like an enemy force. They're kind of like enemies because they're not working towards the same goal. And that whole idea is called Logitaria Vestas. It's actually a Parashara technique, and it looks at how planets are either friends, enemies, or neutral to one another. And I'm not going to get into that in this video. I do plan on doing a blog post on that. And by the way, check out my blogs if you haven't already. I post a lot of the topics that I end up doing videos on anyway. I have a recent blog post on the planets that is entitled Starring the Planets, Characters in the Cosmic Play. So if you want to learn more about the planets, I wrote a blog post recently on that. I highly recommend Ernst Wilhelm's book, Graha Sutras, if you want to learn more about the planets, and take his classes as well if you want to learn, because he talks about the planets all the time. Each time I watch a video on his planets, I learn so much more. But yeah, I would definitely start with the book, Graha Sutras. It's goes into detail about the planets and their functions and things like that. And so today I'm just talking about what they look like generally when they're in an auspicious placement and when they're in an inauspicious placement. And a lot of times the planets have a combination of inauspicious and auspicious results. So these are just kind of like extremes and different possibilities that I'm exploring today. Going back to what I said about two benefics, right? So for instance, say you have the moon in conjunct Venus. Those are often seen as benefic planets. Well, the moon is an enemy to Venus. So what happens is a person with that conjunction may think that they can get their needs met from outside sources, right? Or they can find happiness from outside things, while those outside things such as cars, food, and things like that can provide us with fulfillment. They don't take care of our inner happiness or getting, our inner needs met. They supply the outer needs. So that's just an example. But before I get into like topics like that, I do want to kind of discuss the foundation of the planets and what that looks like. So how I like to think of this, and my teacher Ernst Wilhelm described the planets this way, we can look at our chart as representative of a kingdom. And so all of the planets are sort of players within the kingdom of our chart. And we can look at the sun as the king. We can look at the moon as the queen. We can look at Mars as the general. And the fourth planet is Mercury, and the Mercury can be the prince. And the fifth planet is Jupiter. So Jupiter is like the spiritual advisor, spiritual teacher, philosopher, religion, cultural advisor. And then Venus is an advisor as well, the council. Venus represents sort of like more practical advisors. So he advises on practical matters. And Saturn, we can look at Saturn as the servant. Okay, so I'm going to go over each of those planets a little bit more in detail in this video. Let's describe the kingdom. What is that, for example? So the kingdom is different for each person. It's where that person shines in life. So let's say a person shines the brightest, like they're meant to be a barber, for example, where, well, their kingdom can be the barber shop, right? Even if they don't own the barber shop, that can be their kingdom, cutting hair. That's where they feel inspired most. Or if it's an artist, it's their art studio. There are some people where their home is their inspiration. They love gardening, they love cooking sorry. So their kingdom is their home. And everyone's kingdom is different. Everyone has different responsibilities in life. Some people's kingdom is huge and they have so many responsibilities. So they're responsible over a whole school if they're a principal. Think of what your kingdom is. So what is your kingdom? What is something that you take charge of? Okay, so let's start with the sun, because the sun is the king in our chart. The king is the Atman, which is our soul. And out of all the planets, the sun is one of the most important ones, because it represents our soul. It represents our essence, who we are. It is where we shine, where we innately shine, where we're inspired. So a king, the sun is the leader. It takes charge. It delegates. The sun is here to make long-term goals for the kingdom. It is also here to inspire. So wherever our sun is in our chart, it's here to inspire us, inspire others. Essentially, the sun in our charts is here to make the world a better place. The king of our chart is a noble planet. So the sun is very noble. He takes actions that inspire others. He's not a tyrant. He doesn't bring others down. And it's this inspiration that flows through him. And that's creative as well, this creative inspiration. And a person with an auspicious sun in their chart in general is going to have this magnetic personality, right? So there's something about the sun that creates a magnetism about someone. You're just drawn to that person. Something about them shines. A person with an auspicious sun in their chart is going to have a lot of confidence. I will discuss later how to find out if your sun is in a more favorable position or how it's not in a favorable position. That's going to require more time and detail and description to go over those things. I just kind of want to use this video as a foundation. The sun in our charts represent our father or our father figure. We can tell a lot about someone's father or father figure a lot of times in their chart just by looking at the sun. And also the sun represents our career as well, our responsibilities in life. What kind of responsibilities do we have? Are we able to take care of them? Are we not? The sun is consistent. So a person with a strong, solid sun in their chart can be consistent in terms of their goals. So they tend not to get distracted very easily. So people who don't have a lot of inspiration in their lives, they tend to not be able to stay on a consistent path. They might go here, there, get distracted very easily. They might be in other people's business a lot, gossiping. But a person who's steadfast and who's on their path, they don't really have time to look at what other people are doing, because they're like, oh, I have this creative idea that I need to pursue. I need to do it. I have my long-term goals. So a person with a strong sun is going after those goals. So what does it look like if a person has a sun that's not so favorable in their chart? What does that look like? So a person who has a sun that is not in a favorable position, they may not be consistent on their path. They might change careers a lot. They might not be sure about what they even want to do. There could be some confusion around what am I even supposed to do in this world? Where's my kingdom? What am I supposed to do? So there can be a lot of confusion. A person who doesn't have such a favorable sun in their chart, they probably didn't have an inspiring, shining figure in the home, especially a father figure who got up in the morning and was just so inspired to do what they were here to do, here to make, you know, the world a better place. That there wasn't a person in their lives. They could have a father in the house or the father figure, but the father or father figure was not inspired to go after what they were here to do. Maybe they were in a job that they were just doing for the money. And then that brings me to the next point. So a person who doesn't have a favorable sun in their charts, they themselves may not be in a career that inspires them. And that is a huge issue because the sun is one of the planets that we look at to see how much fire a person has. So the sun is a fiery planet along with Mars, and the sun is like a furnace in a way, if you want to look at it that way, in our gut. And it has a lot of fire, and when someone has a lot of fire, they can burn toxins, believe it or not. So a person with a strong sun in their charts, they can burn a lot of fire, and as they are pursuing their goals which inspire them, so they're constantly burning, and then that can help burn toxins and fat as well. And so a person who doesn't have a lot of fire, who's not doing the job they want to do, they're working a dead-end job, they're doing the job just for the money, they can have more illnesses, more sicknesses oftentimes. So we want to make sure that we are inspired and following our inspired actions, our inspired pursuits, and we want to make sure that we are following our inspirations, our goals, what we're here truly to do. Sometimes people will look at someone else and just say, oh my gosh, they are doing a great job what they're doing, let me do that exact same thing. So they'll do that exact same thing, and they don't do it that well. And even if they do it that well or better, it's not going to bring them fulfillment because it's not what they're here to do. So we got to find out what we are here to do and not look at what others are doing or copy other people or just chase money. You know, that's not what the sun is here for, and that's not going to inspire us. And when we get older and we look back and we're going to be like, oh, what did I do with my life? Oh, I spent 50 years. Yeah, I made a lot of money, but I wasn't doing something that I wanted to do. I wasn't doing something that inspired me. So the sun is really important for inspiration. A person with the sun that's not in a favorable placement can be seen as arrogant. And the sun is not supposed to be arrogant. The sun is confident. And whereas the sun that's not in a strong placement is going to feel like they need to overcompensate. So they might be arrogant, they might be bossy, they might be this kind of tyrant. So that is a sign that maybe that's not a strong sun. The strong sun leads by a noble example. Exemplifying the queen, we have the moon. And the moon is more sensitive to his environment, and the sun is more goal oriented. He's just walking on his path. And so the moon is our subconscious mind. It's also our mother as well in our charts, or a mother figure. It represents our happiness in life, and it represents getting our needs met as well. That's why the moon is exalted in the sign of Taurus. Taurus is the sign of resources. And so when the moon is in Taurus, the moon is able to get his needs met in that sign on a material level. The queen is managing things, okay? The queen is managing all different kinds of things. the moon is flexible, so the moon can go here, it can go here. It's represented by a circle or something that's round, where in Vedic astrology the sun is square. So the moon can adapt, it can go with the flow, and the moon makes these judgment calls based on her inner knowing. She's managing different tasks wherever she's needed, and she's able to be flexible and do different things. The moon is also a leader, and the moon leads by being sensitive to others' needs. So whereas we have the sun, who is more magnetic, who is this bright, shining, confident leader, we have the moon, who is more charismatic and sensitive to what others need. So a person with a strong moon or Cancer in their chart, they can be great leaders, believe it or not. The sun actually does really well in the sign of Cancer, and a person's able to get their needs met in the kingdom very well. The moon is able to be sensitive to other people's needs, so they can be charismatic, they can be nurturing, they can be welcoming, and you can feel like they hear you and they see you, and that's amazing. You want that person back, so you're going to be asking about that person, right? Like, oh, who's that person, you know? And I like them, and the reason why you like them is because they showed interest in you. They weren't necessarily arrogant or anything like that. And then the queen or the moon is leading by kind of knowing what others' needs are. So they can see this person and just say, oh, you might be best if you go over here, you might be best if you go over here. So they have this inner knowing and this sensitivity to their environment. So a person with a strong moon in their charts, they can be, like I said, charismatic, sensitive to others' needs. They have a lot of happiness within them. They have joy, this inner joy within them. They are adaptable, they are flexible in general. When things come up, they know how to get their needs met. They can say, okay, there's a blockage here, let me find another way to get my needs met. Doesn't mean they'll be super excited by the changes that are happening, but they'll be more flexible, like, okay, I'll go in this direction. Also, people with strong moons are able to identify their first feelings. So say it's like they have this emotional maturity about them. So they can say, instead of getting angry at their partner for coming late and throwing pillows at them and yelling at the top of their lungs for coming home late, which no one will respond to really well, to be honest. If we can say, get in touch with our first feelings and say, you know, it hurts me when you come home late. I want to spend more time with you. Is there any way we can spend more time together? And you see, just by asking that question, you can imagine how that'll bring the other person closer. Whereas if you yell and scream at them, you are pushing the other person away. So a person who's in touch with their first emotions has most likely a strong moon. And so what does it look like if a person doesn't have a strong moon in their charts? That can lead to depression, for example. Like, that's probably the number one thing, would be depression, strange behaviors, and ups and downs as well with the emotions. You see that too. You can, see a person often doing things that they're not able to get their needs met in some kind of way. They're also not able to be flexible in their environment. So say something comes up, an emergency happens, and now they're forced to move out the house. Maybe there was a fire in the house or something like that, and now they have to leave. Well, this person's gonna have a hard time moving. They're having a hard time moving on because they're stuck emotionally. They want to stay where they were, or they have to change jobs or whatever. They just so rigid, it's just really hard. So having a strong moon in our charts is really, really important. Oh, another thing about the moon represents our personalities, right? It's who we are. So you can tell so much about a person's personality just based on their moon, whereas the sun is more of our individuality. The moon shows more of our personalities, what we feel comfortable with, how we feel at home. So it also represents like what we're used to. If you're used to living in a certain culture, for example, it may be kind of hard to live in a different culture, right? But if you have a strong moon, you can kind of adapt to being in a new culture more easily. Mars is the general in our chart. So the sun talks to Mars. The sun's like, okay, I need this for our kingdom. I need to do this. And so Mars's job is to protect the kingdom, it's to serve the kingdom, to do things for the kingdom, to go out there and fight, do what it takes to make sure that kingdom is successful. Mars is that focused energy. It can zero in on something and just really focus. And he's also the planet of strategy and logic. So if you think about a general has a plan, right? And so he has these strategies, and let's do this, let's go to this battlefield, and we got to go up in this mountain and do whatever. So he's very logical. Mars is also a planet that has to do with being able to be adaptable, because sometimes we can make a plan and we get there and then plans have to change, right? So Mars is very much a planet of having to be adaptable as well. And a lot of times people think Mars is this angry planet, and it can be, but a person with a strong Mars in their chart, they can be logical, be kind of slow to anger. They can be assertive, but not necessarily angry. So a person who has maybe not such a favorable Mars in their chart, they can maybe sometimes have anger issues. It depends on what that looks like. A lot of frustration. But a favorable Mars, they can be more assertive, maybe slow to anger. There might be more of this righteous anger if they have the strong reason to be angry about something, but they're not just kind of like this loose cannon. That would be more of a Mars that's not in a favorable position. And then also Mars that is in a favorable position, he's able to be organized, and there is just a flow and organization to his thought process. Whereas a Mars that's not in a favorable position, a person can have like deranged energy. Mars is very much a planet of energy. You can also see someone's relative energy levels just by looking at their charts as well, and where they're directing their energy. Do they have more of a focused energy? Is it deranged? Is it chaotic? Is it more disorganized? So but Mars's actions are more precise, logical, organized, and the energy is very focused on a lot of times the goals of the kingdom. Mars is a planet of our will. It's our willpower, right? And it can be our won't power, but it's also saying, I will do this. I will achieve my goals. I will lose weight. I will gain muscle, whatever the case may be. And a person with, maybe not the strongest Mars in their charts, they might be more accident prone. So they can be more prone to accidents, and that can be due to sometimes not thinking logically, or, having their energy doing something that maybe they shouldn't be doing, or maybe doing something that isn't right for them, or they might be hesitant to do something and then they react too slow, and they could be putting their actions towards something else. So if someone's instead of putting their energy towards their successful kingdom, being successful in their kingdom, and they're using that energy to drink, well, their energy is now not where it should be flowing, and so now they're more accident prone. So there can be so many scenarios, but these are just little examples. The next planet we're going to talk about is Mercury. So Mercury is seen as the prince, and Mercury is a very curious planet. He's a planet of investigation, the planet of experiences, right? So, you know, he can just have so many experiences in life and enjoy life and do this. He's also the planet of fun, right? Let's have fun, let's play games, let's do this and that. I don't care, you know, let's explore. That is Mercury. And so that's why it's a prince. When we think of someone who's young, they usually more are curious. They're not usually set in their ways or anything like that. So that's totally Mercury. Mercury also represents our skills and our abilities, our talents, and it's ruled by Gemini. And Gemini can be a very talented sign. And it also has to do with communication as well. So communication skills, languages, you know, anything that has a skill attached to it. And Mercury is that planet that learns, that wants to learn. So another thing about Mercury is that Mercury is the planet of differentiation. It's the planet of Vishnu, who is God, which is a manifestation of all things in the world, everything that we see in the world. And so that is Vishnu, that is Mercury. And so Mercury is a planet of differentiation. So if we didn't have Mercury as a planet, there wouldn't be anything that's different. Everything would be the same. Everyone would look the same. Everyone would talk the same. Everyone would have the same job. Everything would be boring, right? So the cool thing about Mercury is that it's everything. It's everything you see. It's me looking different from you. And how boring would the world be if we all looked the same, if we were all the same culture, we spoke the same language, we all had the same color skin? Life would be so boring. So Mercury is that the all. It's God in everything, but it just looks different. So I think that's the cool thing about Mercury, is that it's just everything. So a person with a solid Mercury in their charts, they can be more accepting of the different things in life and just say, hey, everything's a manifestation of God and it's all good. And not get caught up in like, oh, this person's from this country, I hate you, and none of that, right? It's just everything's of God. And that's the funny thing about it. You know, we can laugh at things because they're different from us. And so Mercury also has that humor about it. And so a person with a strong Mercury is humorous. They can find humor in these different things in the world. And Mercury, a person with a solid Mercury, they can be great communicators. They can be wordsmiths. They can have a way with words that's really nice. And they have a curious mind. So they're curious. They want to try something. They don't get stuck in doing something one way. And they're like, hey, let me try it this way. Let me try going this way. Oftentimes, people with strong Mercuries in their charts, they have a skill. There's something skillful about them. And they have like a craft or something, right? So it's the planet of skill. And they often have confidence in learning something new. Whereas a person with with the Mercury that's not in a favorable position, one thing that can happen is they might not have confidence in learning something new. And they feel scared to kind of go out of that. Or they could be shy, you know, especially growing up, where there can be an insecurity about the way they talk, or maybe there's a, you know, speech impediment or something going on with their speech that they don't feel so confident in. Also, what can happen with an afflicted Mercury is they can have trouble just asking for something, like, oh, can I you know, can I go on a field trip? You know, my best friend's going on the field trip. Her mom said she can go. And then unfortunately, you might not come from a family who is maybe open to questions, and you get slapped on your face or laughed at, or your mom or your parent says, you know, our family doesn't go on field trips. Why even ask that, right? And you're like, whoa. So maybe your person's not used to getting what they want by asking, so they have to get what they want in a different way using their other planets or something like that. So Mercury helps us to ask questions and to have speech that is nice, right? Instead of angry. A lot of people have some anger when it comes to talking and communicating with other people, because maybe they grew up in a household where there was a lot of anger when they talk and speech and stuff like that. So having a really nice Mercury is really cool. It's really important, and a person isn't afraid to ask, or, you know, they don't get mad at you for asking something. So if you ask a person with a solid Mercury in their chart, you know, hey, can I, you know, borrow some money? They might be like, oh, you know, I don't have money right now, I wish I could help you. Or yes, here's some money. Whereas maybe someone else might come back at you really angry. So Mercury has a lot to do with our speech and communication, and there's so many ways how that can play out. But yeah, there can also be confusion about, you know, speech. So when they're giving you directions or something like that, they might tell you the wrong way. Many ways this can play out, but yeah, that's Mercury. The fifth planet is Jupiter. So Jupiter represents the king's spiritual advisor, the king's guru, if you will, religious advisor, right? Philosophy, those kind of things. Wisdom, you know, Jupiter is the planet of wisdom. He's the sage. He's heavy in knowledge about a specific field. So when you look at someone's chart, you can see what they'd be heavy in knowledge in. So I already did a video on that. Check it out. It was about the journey of Jupiter, and I talked about Jupiter in different signs and what that can look like. It's the place where a person's most useful in society. And Jupiter is the charitable planet and represents so many things, such as the spouse in a woman's chart, children. He represents creativity and joy-giving wisdom as well, teaching of some sort. It's also the planet of wealth. Wherever Jupiter is in your chart, that can be where you can find wealth. And Jupiter is the planet of goodness. So a person with a strong Jupiter can just do a lot of good in the world. You know, they can do good, they can be charitable, they can help others, and that goodness just springs forth from within them. They have a lot of, like, some inner knowing within them as well. But a person with a strong Jupiter can be charitable. They can want to just give money or want to give advice, and having that inner knowing that this is the appropriate time to give advice. Or, you know, especially when advice is asked for, they just have a lot of knowledge in a particular area. They can be joyful people that you want to be around, and creative, and they just have this spark of inspiration flowing within them, and you just want to be around people with strong Jupiters. And their actions can be very noble as well. They're not doing things behind other people's backs or anything like that. They try to stay on a noble path that other people like, and they see that within them, and they're about the truth and seeking the truth and following the truth, the path of truth. And a big thing with Jupiter is purpose. So a person they have the wisdom to know what their purpose is. Like, okay, I have a purpose and I'm following that purpose. And it can be a very spiritual planet as well. So they just find a connection based on their philosophy in life, that they're here for a purpose of some sort, right? And this person could come from any kind of religion, or they may not even have a religion, or whatever the case may be, but they just have some kind of wisdom within them to know, like, hey, this is my purpose, this is why I'm here, and they have happiness and joy to spread to others. However, a person who doesn't have such a strong Jupiter, they can attract spouses, for example, in a woman's chart, who may not live up to her expectations, who may not bring her joy. A person with an afflicted Jupiter can have a lot of trouble, a lot of issues with their children. A person can make poor judgment calls. They might not know, you know, they don't listen to their inner knowing, like, oh, I should probably go this route instead of this route, like career-wise, or, you know, or I should ask this person for advice. They can maybe use the wrong judgment and ask a person who, they might ask a person who's like a yoga instructor about how to invest in stock, and they have no history in investing in stock. So you might you need to use better judgment, knowing that a yoga instructor will teach you about yoga. Maybe go to someone who's a financial advisor about finances. So a person with you know, a troubled or afflicted Jupiter may not use the proper judgment all the time. Venus is the king's advisor when it comes to more practical matters. And one thing about Venus is a planet of nature. He's a very natural planet that has to do with natural things, healthy things, relationships, healthy relationships, right? Not toxic relationships, and fulfillment, the outer fulfillment that we get in the world. Jupiter is more of the inner fulfillment that we get from the world. Venus is the outer fulfillment. Venus is the planet of making our lives easier, right? Having a car can oftentimes make our lives easier. So Venus represents cars as well. Venus is the planet of win-win situations, and making sure that everything's fair, balanced, prosperity as well, meaning getting what you need when you need it, not so much money or wealth. That's more Jupiter. Venus is the brightest planet. A person with a solid Venus in their chart, they can exude a lot of brightness. They can just shine. They just have etiquette and grace, and there's something charming and bright about them. That's really nice. And they can appreciate the worldly comforts in life, like wine, but it's not about overindulging. Like I said, Venus is a natural planet, and so it's like taking things in moderation and enjoying things that this world has to give. And Venus is ruled by Taurus, which is a very resourceful planet, or Taurus is a very resourceful sign, so Venus rules Taurus. People with strong Venuses can be great counselors, or some kind of an advisor, or spiritual advisor, or an astrologer even. And they can also be good poets, because Venus rules poetry, and just kind of observing nature and being able to see things in the world that can't really be explained in other ways, so they can be creative in the way they explain things as well. A person with an inauspicious Venus in their chart, they can overindulge. They can be addicted to substances, alcohol, drugs, food even. You know, they can overindulge because they're not maybe feeling like they're getting their needs met. Venus is a planet of rejuvenation, so it helps us to rejuvenate, to renew. It represents vacations and stuff like that, which we definitely need. Nurses as well. Venus represents nurses. So a person with an afflicted Venus in their chart, they might not be able to find a lot of relief from the everyday stressors of life. So They can just be just so stressed from life, right? It can just be hard to recover. Let's say they're an athlete, they get hurt, they have a scar, you know, they get hurt, and it can take them a long time to recover, even because they're afflicted Venus. And Venus is our vitality, so we do need a lot of rest. And a person who has a hard time resting, like they always have to do something, right? If they don't have that balance where they're kind of recuperating and rejuvenating, their vitality gets lower and lower. So there's only so much vitality that we have in a lifetime, and if we're using that up without replenishing ourselves, then our vitality goes down, basically. Saturn is the servant, and in Vedic astrology, it's interesting because the sun is the father of Saturn, and Saturn is kind of like this bastard child, if you will. So there's this interesting dynamic with Sun and Saturn. A lot of people don't acknowledge the help in the kingdom. What Saturn represents in our charts is the drudgery, right? There's always something that we don't want to do. And so that represents the drudgery that we have to deal with. And Saturn also represents pain and trauma. It's the most painful visible planet that we have. It's just so much pain that we have. And just imagine being in the same kingdom as your father, and your father doesn't acknowledge you, and you're a servant, and you have other siblings, half siblings in the kingdom, and they have a better, they're not cleaning the toilets and things like that, but you are. So that's painful. That's the pain of Saturn. And Saturn is just this loner planet, and he does what he needs to do in this life. He takes breaks when he needs to. In fact, in Vedic astrology, he's known as a lazy planet, so he can be quite lazy. Saturn shows what our weaknesses are and what is not us, right? The sun represents who we are, and then Saturn represents who we absolutely are not. Saturn exemplifies our weaknesses and diseases as well. Also losses, lack, and so much more. Saturn that's placed favorably in our charts can really help a person be patient in terms of their goals. They understand that sometimes it takes a lot of work, hard work, and diligence before they can be successful or get a promotion. So they understand that certain things take time. Also, a person with a strong Saturn can survive, right? They can survive if they need to. If they're stuck, or lost in nature, they can somehow find their way out, or just be able to survive out there somehow. So Saturn represents our animalistic, primal nature, right? And so someone with a strong Saturn can really tap into their primal nature and get out there and survive and just kind of persevere in terms of surviving, or in terms of their career goals. They can just kind of do something for the long haul, and it's kind of like going through the drudgery of something, like, oh, despite something that happened to my leg, despite having losses in my life, I'm still going forward, I'm still persisting, I'm still surviving. So it's that strength that a person has to really move forward and progress forward through life, and it's a really important planet. And like I mentioned before, Saturn is a planet that has to do with, basically he's lazy. And so a strong Saturn in someone's chart, they know when to stop doing something. Like, okay, I've been working consistently for the past 2 weeks. Maybe I should take, a day of doing absolutely nothing, or whatever the case may be. Having a good Saturn lets us know when to stop saying something, or even if we're giving advice to someone, when to stop. Maybe I shouldn't say anymore, I've said enough. So Saturn's really important. Now, if we don't have a strong Saturn in our charts, a person may not be able to persevere through the hardships in life. They might have a really hard time staying strong, being able to continue to go. Saturn has so much to do with getting rid of things, right? It's you know, it can clean up things in our charts. It's Saturn is about elimination ultimately, and so when we don't have a strong Saturn, a person may have a hard time letting go, and they can have a hard time letting go of emotions, or maybe there was a death that they had a hard time letting go of, and it could have been a death that happened 20 years ago and they're still holding on to it, and they can hold on to it emotionally and even physically in their space where they're collecting things. They could be hoarding and things like that, so they have a hard time letting go of something or a lot of things. And so someone with a strong Saturn could say, you know, there's no value to this anymore, it's time to let it go. Also, weak Saturn, a person stays in something longer than they should. So maybe they're in a toxic relationship and they should have been gone as soon as they started seeing the signs of you know, toxic behavior, or a person's not able to recognize when they need to quit something or stop doing something because their Saturn is afflicted somehow. Also, Saturn is able to eliminate toxins from the body, so if our Saturn isn't strong in our charts, we may have a hard time getting rid of toxins, detoxing and things like that. Now, Rahu, which is the north node of the moon, and Ketu, which is the south node of the moon, they operate a bit differently than the other planets. And the other planets that I mentioned, those are visible planets, whereas Rahu and Ketu are basically points, and they're not actual planets, but they're forces, and they bring about fated events, and they're very powerful, and they bring about deep transformation in our lives, and they're really, really important, and I would argue probably the most important planets that we have in our charts. And they represent different things, and they can't be afflicted though, but they can cause afflictions to other planets. They can cause shame or an imbalance, because Rahu and Ketu are both extremes. So I'm not going to talk too much about Rahu and Ketu in this video, but I will say that Rahu is known as the foreigner, so it can represent foreign places, foreign people, and because it's this foreign territory, wherever it is in our charts, it can cause confusion. So it causes confusion because we're not developed in that area where Rahu is. So in this lifetime, we're learning to develop whatever house and whatever sign Rahu's in, and whatever planets are in the same sign as Rahu. We're developing that area, and this can cause a lot of confusion. We can make a lot of mistakes in this house, but it's also a house and a sign that we can find a lot of growth, spiritual growth, and we can also do a lot of cool, interesting things in that area. It's like a playground for us. So these are new experiences that we're having. Wherever Ketu is, that represents our past life, and it represents what we have experience with, a lot of experience with in terms of our recent past lives, and it's where we're most comfortable with. It shows who we are as a person, and it represents our ancestral lineage as well. So you could tell a lot about a person's ancestors by looking at Ketu. And with Ketu though, it shows where our limitations are. So we are too narrow, I feel like, with Ketu. We like scrutinize wherever Ketu is, and we feel like we have to be perfect in that area, so we become kind of anal in that area. And in fact, Ketu represents the anus in terms of a dragon. So Rahu's the head of the dragon, and Ketu's the tail end of the dragon, where we're releasing things, and we're releasing kind of old experiences, old habits, things that we no longer need. And so we're here to kind of let go and perfect and master and let go of certain things, whatever house Ketu's in, the sign Ketu's in, and any planets that are also in the same house Ketu's in. We're releasing those things as we are doing more of the new things, more of the Rahu things, and we're here to have a balance. We're not here to do all of Ketu things, and we're also not here to do all of Rahu things. We want to have a nice balance between the two, between the old and the new. And so we're often limited by Ketu, so we want to not be so anal, I guess, with the Ketu things. We don't want to be too critical of Ketu things and like, oh, it has to be perfect, right? So for example, let me give an example of this. Maybe someone with Ketu with Mercury, right, in the same sign as Mercury, they might have recent past lives where they learned a certain skill, or maybe they knew multiple languages and they were kind of a perfectionist when it came to, you know, a particular language. And in this lifetime, they're here to, you know, kind of perfect maybe their skills in a certain way, but also understand that, you know, it doesn't have to be perfect. Because wherever Ketu is, we're really good at that, actually. And we just we're so good at it that we doubt our abilities with that. So a person with Mercury with Ketu, they can doubt their ability to communicate really well, or to their ability with a certain skill or something. So there's so much to say about these planets, and I can't give these planets enough time, you know. I can't give them enough credit. The planets, and learning about the planets, is such a beautiful thing, and how they relate to our charts. And I can't wait to discuss more about the planets more in detail. But like I said in the beginning, I highly recommend reading Ernst Wilhelm's Graha Sutras, just to get more of an understanding about the planets from a Vedic astrology perspective. And I would love to just use this video as a foundation video to discuss even more interesting topics about astrology. And let me know what you would like me to discuss. I plan to do another video very soon on the differences, on some differences I see between modern Western astrology and Vedic astrology. But let me know if you have any other topics. And thank you so much for watching. And please like, share, comment, subscribe, all of that. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye.